So, Dave, I'm sure you go without, don't need any introduction, but just for anyone who might not be fully aware of the reach you have and kind of the history that you've had with the industry, tell us a little bit about how you got started with everything and kind of where you came from and how you got to New Blood.
Yeah, I was born in Harlem, New York in 1984, a long time ago.
Yeah.
Anyway, no, I've been in the industry, I guess we're going on 15, 16 years. So I used to, back in like 07, 08, I was selling used cars by day, and by night I was playing World of Warcraft about 8 hours a day, 7 days a week, as many people did back in 2007.
Shit.
So that was my second job, and there was a guy I met on there. He's a warrior. His name was Rip10, and he had a gaming blog. And I said, "Hey man, can I write for your gaming blog? I'd love to like review and preview games and stuff." And he was like, "Yeah, sure, whatever." Fast forward a little bit, we made the blog get pretty popular. I got pretty popular as a games blogger, dude. And then one day, I was covering this game. I've told this story so many times. These dudes out of Denmark were trying to remake Duke Nukem 3D in Unreal Engine. It was called Duke Nukem Reloaded. There was this tall, handsome man named Frederick. And he was like, "Dave, I really like what we're trying to do, the Duke Nukems, and you really got us a lot of your publicity and stuff. If you ever finish the blogging and the writing and the whatnot, maybe you can come help us do the marketing for the Duke Nukem." And I was like, "Well, shit, yeah, cool." I think every game blogger's dream is, eventually to make the jump from, media over to, there used to be a game called, I forget what it was called. It wasn't Game Dev Simulator or something. And like when you it was like Game Blog Simulator. And when you beat the game, you become a community manager at like a gaming company. Yeah. So around 2010, 2011, I made the jump over and I became the marketing dude for Interceptor Entertainment. Now Slipgate, 3D Realms, but it was a long time since they were called Interceptor.
Yeah.
And we, the plan was to do Duke Reloaded. And then Gearbox was like, "You can't fucking make a Duke Nukem game, you stupid bastards." And we were like, "Sorry, Randy." And so we got on the phone with Terry from Apogee, the new Apogee. Terry Nagy's the guy, guy from the old Apogee. One of the office dudes from the original Apogee, who's good buddies with Scott Miller, who you should have on this podcast, by the way. I don't know if you had Scott on yet, but Scott's always got shit to say. You can't.
He's on the list to reach out to.
You can't stop him. You can't stop podcast for those 5 hours.
Yeah,
I'm sure he's got stuff to say about 3D Realms. He always does.
There's always some tea.
He always does, yeah.
So Fred got me in touch with Terry from Apogee, and because we were like, well, we can't make a Duke Nukem game. What are we gonna do? And they, Apogee did have the rights to do they had the rights to do a non-first person shooter. And this is kind of like post Duke Forever, like 2011. My timeline, I've told this story so many times, it's starting to get fuzzy. So this is kind of like post Duke Forever. Duke Nukem's kind of not, the IP anybody wants to touch right now. But Apogee apparently did have the rights to do one more Duke Nukem game, like as long as it's not a first person shooter, and it had to be called Mass Destruction. For some reason, there was like a loophole in the paperwork that they had from like
specifically that keyword.
I got signed some deal on a napkin somewhere, and it was like carved out that like Apogee had the rights to do one more Duke Nukem game. They ended up losing those rights after Gearbox sued them again or whatever. But at the time, they were like, "Yeah, we want to do this another Duke Nukem game. Are you interested in doing that with us, Dave? About doing marketing and helping invest and stuff. I had some money too." And I was like, absolutely fucking not. I want nothing to do with Duke Nukem. Which is not true. I ended up doing, we did Duke Nukem 2 re-release. We did, I got Duke Manhattan Project release on Steam, which that was my most proudest accomplishment back then. Yeah. And then Gearbox subsequently pulled it off Steam a few years later, but I still got it in my library. We did the Apogee Platformer Pack. But, I was about to get off this phone call and say, like, "Sorry, guys, I don't think I can do this with y'all anymore. I'll go back to, selling used cars or whatever." We were literally about to hang up the phone, and I go to Terry. I was like, "Hey, you guys still have, like, the rights to do do you guys still have the rights to Rise of the Triad? Does anybody remember Rise of the Triad?" And Terry was like, "Yeah, we got the Rise of the Triad. We were trying to do a reboot with some fellers down here." My Terry and Fred impressions are getting worse year on year. Terry's a lot more like Hank
They'll
Hill.
be watching this
you know,
thinking, what the hell is this guy doing?
Yeah, so Terry's literally like Hank Hill from Texas, just a tall man, but instead of propane, he sells solar panels. So it's very, but like if you picture Terry from Apogee, it's literally like, dang it, Frederick, I wanted the split missile. God dang it. So that's Terry. So he was like, yeah, we can do Rise of the Triad. We were trying to do that with some fellas down here, and he's not that fucking southern. Some guys down here, but it wasn't really getting going. And I go to Fred. I was like, dude, I would love to do. Fred was on the call too. I was like, dude, I'd love to do a rot something. And Fred was like, and Fred who just says yes to anything to try to get it. He was like, yeah, we could do rot. We could do that for like no money. It ended up being like all the money. But he was enthusiastic, and we're like, shit, let's go. And that's how Rise of the Triad reboot, 2013 got started. It was originally supposed to be Rise of the Triad 2012, but it ended up getting pushed like almost a year. It still came out pretty fucking janky. It was the first game we ever worked on. It was built, everybody on the team was basically a modder. So it was built like basically a big Unreal mod. There was like no static meshes. Everything was like, every piece was a draw. Oh my God, it runs like ass. But, like, we didn't know what we were doing. But we did it. We made a game. We rebooted Rise of the Triad. It wasn't exactly what I wanted. What I wanted to do was like a remaster, what we ended up doing like 10 years later with Nighttime. But Fred was like, no, it has to be state of the art, cutting edge, Unreal Engine. Dude, he was putting, like, he would go in, we'd like finish a level, and then Fred would go in and like add like lens flare and dirt and all this shit to make it look like, just, he would Michael Bay the shit out of the levels. It was so funny. We'd be like, stop. He's like, no, this is what they do now. It's like, I was like, God damn it, Fred. But it was whatever. I think Civi said it the best. It was like, it's a janky piece of shit, but its heart's in the right place, right?
Beautiful.
That was Rise of the Triad 2013. And then, hey, we made a video game. I marketed a video, and it sold pretty well. Because back then, Steam, there was no green light. Steam didn't have user reviews or anything. We were in the top 10. I think it was like number 3 at the time. There was 500 games on Steam when Rise of the Triad. That was still when you had to know somebody at Valve to get a game on Steam. It wasn't just like pay $100 to put anything on Steam. Like Terry and Dan from Apogee, may he rest in peace, got me in touch with Valve. And Valve, at GDC one year, because you used to literally have to pitch your game to Valve to get on Steam and be like, please, Papa Valve, please put my game on your store and give me free money. Because back then, like, any game that got on Steam was basically, you made money because there was so few games on Steam. It's not like now where you have to scratch and claw for, to get anybody to notice you. And I met with them at GDC 2012, and I've told this story a bunch too, where I was like, hey, so we want, and they were just coming out with Greenlight. That was like their new initiative. Hey, you want to put a game on Steam? We've got this new thing where communities can vote for your game. I kind of miss Greenlight, because now Steam is just like anything's on there. At least back then you used to have to fucking try.